Dude, how old are you now?
That's not a number I need to share.
No, but you haven't changed since I first met you, right? You got
I know. I mean,
no
there's a little bit more
gray.
gray here.
Did you get a little
Yeah.
bit?
Yeah. It's funny, a couple of, like, last year, actually, it's a year ago, because for Pride, my friend dyed my beard pink, and he was like, oh, don't worry, it just washes out tonight. And then it didn't wash out for a week, and I had to be in a meeting with, I don't remember who, it was like right around the acquisition. And I was like, I probably shouldn't make my first introduction to them with a pink beard. So I had to get the, like, men's beard coloring to find the brown that matched. And then I was like, ooh, I like not having the gray anymore.
That reminds me, the fact that you sticky taped a business logo over the top of your I I gotta ask you, when you did that in the morning, was
Yeah.
it like, oh, this will be funny?
Yeah, no, the whole point was, it was a joke, because, like,
Oh,
it was a vest from the very last company that I had worked at. It was one of the pieces of swag we got at one point, and it had that logo, and I was like, that's, I'm in a room full of a bunch of people that I'm meeting for the first time. It'd be one thing if it was just like a North Face logo, right?
yeah,
But like
yeah.
a logo of a different company, I was like, that's not bad. People do that all the time. But wouldn't it be funny? Because at the time, also, former head of the PMO had pissed off a bunch of people by ordering PMO swag. And he got special sweaters or something printed with a special logo, and everyone was annoyed by it. And so, like, the combination of don't be a dick introducing yourself to new people with your old company that you just joined from. And so, yeah, I printed, but I had to print that out 3 days earlier when I flew from Seattle to Austin. So I knew exactly what I was doing. Yeah.
Oh man, I thought he was serious. I thought it was like, I thought you thought it was a good
No.
idea. I thought you were like, nobody will notice. It was great.
No, no.
I've been
Yeah,
dying
no.
to ask you,
I
man. I forgot about that, but every time I remember, it's
no,
like,
I am I am the person in the meeting who's going to look for the joke. I think
okay,
it's
yeah.
fun to be funny with people. I cannot understand people who are serious all the time, so I will always look for the opportunity to be stupid. I think it's
Yeah,
fun.
I've worked with some real
Yeah.
sour pusses where you make a joke in a meeting, you're like, oh, okay, let's get
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Like,
Yeah,
and it's one thing if you're your own startup person and they just have to deal with the founders and you can just be whoever you need to be. It's another thing to be in a company of like 30,000 people and show up to some of those meetings where you're not allowed to be that guy. Like, it sucks. That is never going to be who I am. I am going to crack a joke with the fucking CEO who's responsible for $10 billion in revenue. I can't not be. And so sometimes that works. Sometimes it does not. Welcome to Acceptance Criteria, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of how software gets made and how we can all do a better job together. My name is Kevin Thomas Euland, and across the chat from me is Andrew Greener. Say hi, Andrew.
hi, Andrew. We're also here to get deeper on the human elements. I could go on for an eternity about people and how they think about the process of building complex systems, and I can't think of two better people to do that than Kevin and I.
Yeesh. Which is why we need more guests on this show. If you've got a topic you'd like to come discuss or rant about, drop us a note and we'll see if we can get you on a future episode. You can go to acceptancepod.com/guest and submit your ideas. Also, don't forget you can follow us on most apps. We're at AcceptancePod. We'll post links to show notes and any articles from the blog over there.
We're also building a community on Reddit at r/acceptance criteria, or you can find us on Discord. Once there, you'll find links to show notes and other artifacts you'll find on our blog. We promise to moderate the heck out of anything submitted to the team to keep it a nice little slice of the internet.
On this week's show, we'll be digging into some more Reddit questions. But before we get to all of that, let's take a short break and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back. This is a segment we like to call User Stories, where we dig into some interesting questions on Reddit that we can tackle. All right, Sour Peach. SURPEECH. Agile is an excuse for poor planning? I'm a back-end dev with 5 years of experience. Recently, I was tasked to plan out a new project, and I said, let's figure out the data model. I sat with the client, and they put together about 100 tables within half a working day. Everyone is disagreeing with this method because it halts dev time. I've had the grief of maintaining a few projects that are taking years because of this pure agile mindset, I feel. We kept doing table migrations that could have been avoided if we planned up front instead of starting with one table and scaling up to 50. To be honest, these should have been shipped out within a year. Please tell me I'm not crazy. I'm not sure where the beef is. And I think, to me, this is the perfect example of being strict adherence to agile will get you in trouble. You absolutely at certain times should do more planning than what is strictly like, even it are you Scrum, are you Kanban? Agile itself doesn't tell you you can't do some degrees of that. It's the Scrum handbook or whatever that tells you everything has to be a user story that goes into sprint planning, blah blah blah. And even that, I don't know, like, stop being such adherence to agile as this like thing that you have a user story and within 2 weeks you decide what to do and you're iterative. This guy's right. Yeah, if you know enough quickly enough and you can define that and make sure that you're not painting yourselves into corners, having to undo work that you did in previous sprints. Yeah, whatever amount of planning makes sense. And if this guy was able to define 100 tables within a half a day, which sounds insane, but also if you, depending on the industry you're in, I could rattle off 30 tables that should go into a CRM system tomorrow. So yeah, I can absolutely imagine you know exactly what you need to do. You need to track customers, accounts, transactions, line items, subscriptions. You absolutely could define a pretty comprehensive data schema for a problem pretty quickly and make sure that you don't build bad code because you weren't aware that in the future transactions need to have line items that track the different products that were purchased. And so you now need to undo code you did 3 sprints ago. Of course, some of that's beneficial. I think the answer is don't spend 4 months planning out every perfect possible scenario. Yes, you should absolutely do things iteratively and quickly, but there's nothing wrong with doing a little bit of pre-planning if you know you can spot pitfalls and future problems. I don't know, like I can imagine the type of person who freaked out at being given a 100 table schema on day 2, but I don't know, I'm fine with this.
Yeah, I'm actually fine with this one too. Immediately looking at you like 100 tables in half a day, maybe the guy needs a promotion. Like, if the data model wasn't terrible, right? Like, if their complaint
Right?
is that, hey, half a day, that's not very agile. It's like the dude put together 100 tables in the data model in half a day. So,
With the client on
yeah,
the call, so you
yeah.
have no risk of like, yeah, I don't know.
So maybe that's why they're
This is the
sour.
thing, is iterate.
Yeah, iterate. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's easier to take tables out, right, than it is to do what he or she is suggesting happen, which is table migrations, which we all know how much fun that can be depending on the database, right, and the data.
Right.
Yeah, I think I've often said in my career, my biggest fear is being marginalized, where
Mm-hmm.
you feel it. You say something, and then 3 years later it comes to pass, and you're like, it's not like we didn't have a conversation about this back in the beginning, right? So
Right.
this is that classic case of somebody was probably doing something. It doesn't actually seem like an agile versus, or it's not like an agile versus, like, nothing this guy did doesn't seem like it could have been agile either, right? Like, half a day. We're talking about
Right.
a couple of points
That's
of,
nothing.
right. It's like, doesn't seem that
Right.
complex. Seems like a lot.
No.
100 tables in half a day. If you think,
100 tables does seem insane. Like, have you over engineered, like, did you create a column oriented data structure?
yeah, because
But
that's
like
25 an hour. Which, it's 25 tables an hour, which is like, break it down. They were sort of
yeah.
doing a table every 2 minutes. It's
Right.
not really long enough
Which,
to
I
define
mean,
the schema, is it?
no, that yes, I have a ton of questions about this specifically, but conceptually, the idea that you could do some amount of low-hanging pre-work, and are there going to be complaints that you won't actually implement tables 25 through 50 until the third sprint, and tables 51 through 75 until the sixth sprint, and so you've like done too much ahead of time, and that's allegedly anti-agile? Like, I can imagine some types of arguments where it's bad to have done this much pre-planning, but nothing like, I guess this is the problem I have, is just like, okay, so you were a little bit wrong. What was wasted? You wasted 4 hours and you have to go back to the client and tell them, oh, we learned in the third sprint that actually a couple of these tables need to change, so we're going to change them. Like, I feel like people get stuck in process for the sake of following the process, not did it solve the problem that we were trying to solve effectively and efficiently. And I don't know. I just think people need to get out of their ways and not be so strict in adhering to this. And also, this is a challenge with engineering. engineering of finding that balancing act between how do you over plan versus under plan. And there is no black and white answer. Sometimes this 4 hours was entirely throwaway, and that's a little bit goofy, but who cares? And sometimes you saved yourself a ton of grief later by doing a little bit of pre-planning. I'm open to like a freaking week of pre-planning if we know that there's stuff that's coming up that we want to talk about and avoid. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I think these are the humans, right?
Right.
The hard thing about this is you have to be in the room when it's all taking place because it can just be an ego-driven engineer who's got 10 years of experience who doesn't like the fact that this 5 year of experience engineer is having a good idea and they want to flex like, oh well that doesn't, and we've all seen them, right? That doesn't sound very agile. Let me put together a
Right.
whole 3 month chart we can talk about for a whole quarter of how agile should work and did it. And it's like, dude put together 100 tables in 4 hours or do that. But yeah, this one's, you're not crazy, but you are
No.
fascinating, Sour Peach.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that's an odd one.
All right, leading farmer 3923. Architecture design feels like the Wild West. How are you making it work? Saw a stat recently that said about 60% of engineering teams don't have a clear process for architecture design. Not super surprising, but kind of wild when you think about how many problems we try to solve after the code is written. Like, we'll debate for hours over code formatting or testing libraries, but when it comes to architecture, it's usually just vibes and a Google Doc from 2021. Some teams do it and they list out a couple of different ways: C4 models, ADRs in Git, Miro, or Excalijaw. I've never heard of Excalijaw. Miro, basically whiteboarding tools. Some just do it through Slack and tribal knowledge. And the final comment is, but not having any process. That's how you end up rewriting half your backend 9 months in. So I'm curious, how are you designing architecture in your team right now? What tools are you using? Any process that's actually worked? Any thoughts?
Oh yeah, yeah. I wasn't sure if you were gonna do obnoxious
Oh,
name.
I mean, I figured if you had
Oh, I
any
do. I
immediate
mean,
thoughts,
this
but I do hate this next guy's answer.
Yeah, I mean, this is my life, right? And
Yeah.
they're absolutely right. And actually, we've done a good job, and including working with you, right? Like we've had our architects working with teams like yours to get into the planning process, but also start to break into the engineering process at the earliest opportunity to say,
Right.
what are you thinking of buying? What are you thinking of building? The next thing that we sort of said in 25, 26 was going to be getting to that architecture decision record level. And we've already started, but it's a little bit more ad hoc. But absolutely, I love leading pharma for recognizing this. And the things that we run up against are lack of resources, time, obnoxious engineers who I think this is what JH125486 is going to wind up being like. I don't need an architect. I'm an engineer. I've been doing it for 10 years. I know it. And I always say the same thing to these guys. Cool. You did this within your domain. Take it to the enterprise. Like,
Mhm.
get 250 people using this component, not a Confluence doc, not just you throw it out in GitHub and they can download it. It's like roll out something complex to the enterprise. And this is where they fall over. And I've seen these guys at every company I go to. Some of them even have the same names and they look the same. It's like they genetically came from the same mold of asshole.
Yep.
And yeah, but everything that this person asks, absolutely stuff we've been talking about. Obviously, the C4 model, we're starting to solve that with our architecture application that we have in house. ADRs, we're getting to. Miro, same thing. We're solving that with the architecture tool that we have. And then we do that. We do actually have very high level conversations with different LLMs, right? To say, hey, I'm thinking of this pattern. What should I be considering? Because we know stuff, but we're not experts on everything. And I always describe architects as you're like brownies or Cub Scouts, right? You've got these badges of expertise. And if you don't have one, but you're touching on the border of another expertise that you don't have, quite often you want to bounce those ideas off of them. And
Sure.
sometimes companies just don't have anybody in that discipline at all. So I love that list. There's a lot more that we do than just that list. You think about
Sure.
guilds and stuff like that. If you can get a good guild program and get your tribes, people who are genuinely interested in a topic, even though it might not be their day to day, if you can foster that kind of culture, amazing. Some of the things we've been doing too is like communities of practice where we're trying to get more solution architects into conversations. And right now
Yep.
it's a little bit more ad hoc where we got guys who they're almost like telephone operators, right? Plugging in saying, hey, let me connect you with Kevin Euland and a couple of other guys that I know they're talking about this stuff. But even then that's fine, it's organic. You get people who just hearing things and saying, oh, I know who to take you to have a better conversation about that, and then capturing it in our architecture platform. That's key, right? Now we've got the people who are responsible and accountable for things. Now we've got people who can go search the architecture and say, oh, Kevin Euland, he's accountable for this piece of the architecture or this platform or these vendors and these IT components that we're using. So important if you can capture that in a repository, because then that'll drive your communities of practice. So I love this.
Well, and I think there's absolutely a balancing act. The agile principles in a lot of cases are good. You should not spend 3 months over engineering a thing for every possible future problem you think you might encounter. So there is a balancing act here of, is it architecture because you've never done this before and it's your very first time building out the data in a data lake, some magic new piece of technology that you've never used before? And yes, it's going to feel waterfall. You should spend a month figuring out the way that this architecture should work so that you build it the right way. But there are absolutely situations where you're trying to even explore whether this is a good thing. You've got a couple of customers that prove that you should do a POC, but no, you don't need to spend, a ton of planning time building the perfect API gateway solution that handles every single future thing. So there is absolutely a balancing act here. But I think right now a lot of people get stuck in that agile mindset of, well, if I can't do it in the 2 week sprint, then that's not agile and we're not doing things correctly. And it's like, that is entirely context specific. If you guys have been doing something for the last 3 years and you have a solid architecture and the thing you're doing is making one tweak to it, yeah, there's probably some experience, there's probably some quick consulting you could do with EA and you could figure out how to do this, but entirely depends on what you're trying to build.
Yeah, and I like that. I do like the two bullets, but we'll come back to that after you finish your point.
Well, right. So I think the guy's anticipating the kind of thing. So this responder JH125486, crappy username, crappy sounding dude. I wouldn't call what I do, quote, architecture anymore at all. Architecture has been taken over by architects who have no experience beside making a to-do app and deploying it with Lightsail while studying for the next AWS cert. I do engineering. I start with a technical problem and work through iterations of solutions, constantly refining and expanding my approach. I build up from basic technical implementations toward complete systems that not only function correctly, but also align closely with business requirements, which invariably also involves operations, security, and FinOps. As for documentation of this process, there are plenty of different ones out there. You'll have to find one that works for your org. It could be as simple as an ASCII flow diagram versioned into your repo, or as complicated as writing up a white paper for your decisions. And cool, bud. Cool. Fucking amazing. Love that for you. Are you a one-person engineering team? Are you the one doing all of this on your own? You build up from basic technical implementations towards complete systems that not only function correctly. Amazing. Have you accounted for how this, is to your point earlier, scales out to the rest of the enterprise? Have you accounted for what that's going to look like in future iterations of features that you get new requirements for? There are absolutely cases where, yes, you're doing a proof of concept to deliver whether this is even a good thing. Sure, start basic, iterate towards the thing that you want to do. But guaranteed, the person's comment earlier, we're going to 9 months later re-architect an entire thing because, yeah, you quick coded the fact that you just needed the two tables that you were going to interact with through a single API. And then it turns out by the time you get to the real requirements later, where it's a multi-tenant system with 1,000 users simultaneously accessing it, it doesn't work that way. And you could have spent an extra week talking about the growth of this product and this feature and figured that out and realized we can build without doing that, but we're going to build it in the right way. The problem I have with a lot of this thought process is just because we design a thing to anticipate a future problem doesn't mean we need to code all of that solution at once before releasing. You can actually absolutely build an agile backlog that anticipates future requirements that you don't need to deliver for 3 months while iteratively delivering value, but not in a way that paints you into a corner where you then have to undo a bunch of code. A little bit of planning goes a long way, and the people who aren't willing to have that conversation with me, you and I have done this many times successfully. We know where we want to be in 6 months, and so we don't write poor code, but we don't write the 6 months worth of code before delivering it. You get delivery every, probably not 2 weeks if you're starting from scratch, but you can increment to a good solution. It pisses me off when people aren't willing to even have that conversation.
Yeah, sounds like some douchey On-prem. I mean, there's a couple of clues that this guy's a douchey on-prem guy where it's like, first of all, somebody pissed me off because they moved to the cloud, so I'm going to go after AWS. It's like, oh, and
Yep.
then second douchey, ASCII flowchart. Come on, really? Like,
Absolutely not. Are you kidding me?
yeah,
Is it 1997? Fuck off.
yeah. So it's some douchey, I don't know, somebody who probably spent too long in academics and now just wants
No,
to,
no, it's not shit on
oh,
academics.
I'm not shitting on academics, but you know the guy's like some kind of I just yeah, I can smell them
Yeah,
from
no,
here.
we know exactly who this guy is. Yes, exactly. All right. Anything else we should do? I think I'm not sure we've given an actual answer here, other than there are creative ways to balance both. And I think it always the problem I have with this actually, some of the advice we give on this podcast in general is it's like I don't know how to describe what you and I would do in the actual situation because it is so dependent. There are no black and white answers here. There are thousands of shades of gray. So yes, if your guys are starting from truly scratch and have nothing built, then there's some upfront planning that makes sense. If you guys already have a framework and you guys want to iterate on it a little bit, I'm open to some versions of this. I don't know, like the future of this podcast is a consulting firm because we need to actually hear what each one of these companies and users are running into. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can give several examples across different companies, right? Like the C4 modeling and Structurizer. Like I've done the diagram as code, right? Like with Structurizer
Sure.
and C4 models. I love C4. I think it's great, but it's hard to, it doesn't get people who don't like to document. But it's a nice simple 4 levels of diagram. But
Sure.
if I'm working with somebody who doesn't know
But
how
it
to
does
do
get out
that,
of date if you don't have the commitment to it, right?
yeah, but you can actually go a little bit, you can actually go a little bit programmatic on it. So maybe you do something where you connect into your code and pulling out the interfaces and then generating your diagrams from that, depending on the level you want to
Sure.
be at. So you can do some stuff like that. I think since I found like architecture products like a LeanIX and an RDoc, I'll never look back, right? As a chief architect or a head of an EA, because my meta model is everything, right? It's
Sure.
generating my diagrams for me. So now they're living and breathing based on the meta. The challenge with
Right.
those is it's one of those systems where it's empty on day one. And if you release it to the
Mm-hmm.
masses, it's junk. It's going to be junk. So you have to do a
Right.
very deliberate rollout. Different levels of the meta model get filled in. But for the first two or
Yep.
3 years, nobody wants to know what you're doing until they start to see the results of your 2 to 3 years of hard work. Then they start to
Sure.
see the dashboards and they're like, holy crap, we didn't even know anybody was tracking this. It's like, holy crap, we didn't know you could run a business without this. Like, how do you possibly make decisions on a multi-year Oracle migration if you don't even know what that Oracle is feeding as like systems
Right.
downstream, right? So there's a lot of systems out there for architecture teams too, and they double up. Now you've got your repository for other architects to be searching for applications and IT components. I've done it in the past with GForge, SourceForge, GForge, right? Where you want everybody seeing if somebody wrote an encryption algorithm, don't go write your own. It's in the repository. We've got this sort
Right.
of community of engineers. So it's like you say, the culture you're in and the tools you have
Mm-hmm.
and then the people. But the problem with the douchey answer from douchey what's his name, I'm not even gonna try say his douchey name, but
Yep.
it's so narrow. Like we're also building
Right.
profiles of the next hires based on the technology that we know is coming in either via us or there are other teams and saying, hey, that changes the paradigm. We're going to a consumer driven and like event driven architecture, and our engineers don't know that, and our QA guys don't know that. Oh, and by the way, it introduces a bunch of design patterns that we're not primed to take advantage of. Like it's so holistic. I always joke the only thing we don't care about are the vending machines because we're all remote. But if we did, we wouldn't be putting candy and soda next to the engineers because at 3 p.m. they'd be asleep, right? So it's not just about coding and building a platform. There's so much more to it than that, right? There's just so much more to
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Well, and I think when we've talked in the past about like what would the next version of the Agile manifesto be and the next version of Scrum or Kanban, I genuinely think this is a perfect example of why there is no universal rule. It depends. Are you a startup? Are you an enterprise? Is it an internal tool? Is it things users users are going to face? Is it one-off for a client? Like, there's so many factors that go into, if I'm a startup, I want to spend a little bit of time. I don't have the runway to spend 6 months, but I want to make sure I'm building something, because startups are terrible at managing tech debt. You do not have the runway to manage tech debt. So actually, it's worth your time to do a little bit of this, but it can't be the same level that you might do if you're an enterprise who needs to support technology that gets used by 13 different teams. And so, like, my answer does depend on what type of company, what type of software, who are the users, what are they like. There's so many factors that go into whether or not I think I'm 100% agreeing with this person or 50% agreeing with this person, or actually every once in a while, yeah, a senior engineer and 3 people can just go off and do a thing for a client, because who fucking cares? So, like, it's so context dependent.
Yeah, it is. And I was not arguing, but I was sort of pushing back on someone the other day where, so I use the example, I'd just been talking to a team in the last few months who were going to rebuild their entire Python application. And I was sort of okay with it. I'm like, hey, can you investigate some no code, low code solutions? And it, came up in the conversation that they'd only built this thing 5 years ago. I was like, man, 5 years is not a long time, right? Like, it's not a long
Mm-hmm.
time for an application to live that you're going to rebuild again. And it's also then you start to question, what have you learned in 5 years that's going to guarantee you don't need to build it again in 5 years? Because you're the guys who built it
Right.
5 years ago, and now you're asking me to trust you to build it again. 5 years is not a very big shelf life. It's not a long shelf life for a product. So
Right.
yeah, yeah, I love it. I love architecture. I love it because of how holistic it is. But you got to check your ego, right? There are architects who sit in rooms and all they do is draw diagrams.
Right.
And you got to know where the line is. You got to know when to call another architect and say, this is not my expertise. I can fake it, but it's not. Like, I'm going to need you, and we're going to need to put together a real project, not just some diagrams, right? And like,
Right.
we might embed ourselves with these teams and live the pain. And yeah, it really depends on culture. So
I think that also is part of it, is like, if an enterprise architecture team is overtaxed because it's not being supported by the companies sufficiently, it doesn't work as well as when you have a robust architecture team that can go to the stand-ups, that can go to the grooming ceremonies, that can be there embedded with the teams, not every day necessarily, but frequently enough. And it feels like a partnership with the engineering teams to be able to say, hey, the thing we all spent 2 weeks, 6 months ago working out, we all agreed it was only going to get us to this certain point, and we've run into the next set of questions. What's the answer for this 2 week sprint? And like, when you're embedded with those teams, it works a lot more effectively.
and it's also a great layer in the sandwich of accountability, right? Because sometimes you got engineers and then you've got your manager who's off stuck in meetings and updates and all this kind of stuff. And there's sort of a weird accountability for engineers where the boss almost doesn't know what's going on at times. Like, you got this senior leader who's, leading all these engineers. With an architect there, I quite often want to let people know right away, like, when we make this decision, you've got cover. If this goes
Right.
if this goes pear-shaped, I'm accountable. I was with you. Like, I made this decision with you. And as an architect, the expectation would be that I dotted my I's and crossed my T's alongside you guys. So I do
Right.
like to remind teams, like, hey, when I'm here, if we mess up, the accountability is on me, right? Like,
Right.
and if I let you push me in the wrong direction, the accountability is still on me. I shouldn't have allowed myself to be swayed and cut a corner, right? So I do enjoy architecture. I love it for those reasons.
All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Acceptance Criteria. To read articles that we've written on similar topics to the ones we talk about here, head over to the blog at acceptancepod.com. And a quick reminder, whether this is your first episode or you've been listening for a while, we wouldn't say no to your going and dropping 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leaving us a nice review. And if you want to leave us a bad review, remember the name of the podcast is The Thrilling Adventure Hour. Also, tell your friends if you like the show and that they should check it out. Some of the best podcasts out there grow by word of mouth, and we'd much appreciate it.
And a friendly reminder that we're always interested in hearing questions directly from you, our listeners, especially for our segment user stories. If you've got a scenario you'd like help with, whether it's working with a problematic engineering or product team member, trying to navigate the never ending pitfalls with agile processes, or you just can't understand why your favorite app is evolving away from what drew you to it in the first place, we're here to talk it through with you. You can send those questions to acceptancepod@gmail.com or submit them on the Discord in the user stories channel, and we might be able to help you on a future episode. And we're happy to keep it anonymous so no one can trace it back to you if you end up shit talking a coworker or something.
For now, I'm Kevin Thomas Euland, and you can find me on most apps at K Thomas Euland. That's ULLAND.
And I'm Andrew Greener, and you can find me on most apps at Criteria Greener. That's GREINER. And this has been Acceptance Criteria. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you.